Alright guys, here is your video for drawing angles. So now that we have algebraically gone back and forth between degrees and radians from our last video lesson, now we can sort of talk about drawing those angles and what they look like and how we'll sort of use the coordinate plane here, how we'll use a circle here. But before we begin, I just want to go over a few vocab words with you. So we have the vertex of our angle here, which you can see. The initial side is where my angle starts, and the terminal side is where my angle ends. So we'll come over to here, and when I look at that on a coordinate plane, the initial side is always what extends into onto my x-axis here, so in quadrant 1, so really those positive x values, and my terminal side is just the other end of my angle. So here would be the measure of my angle here. So talking about what angles look like sort of on a coordinate plane. Here, this would be 90 degrees. So this perpendicular line between the x-axis and the y-axis, this would be a measure of 90 degrees. Over here, we can have a measure of 90 degrees and 90 degrees, which gives me 180 degrees. Moving forward, so this entire degree measure here, so just that straight line would be 180 degrees. Moving forward, so here let's come up with another color here. Moving forward, if this is my initial side and I'm coming all the way down here, so that would be 90 degrees plus 90 degrees, which gives me 180, and I'm adding another 90 degrees, which is going to give me 270 degrees. And if I add that final 90 degrees, I'm back up here at 360 degrees. And in our previous lesson, we talked a little bit about how angles are measured in degrees and radians, and we know that there are 360 degrees in a circle, or 2 pi radians in an entire circle. So if you come down here to my last diagram that I have for you, we can measure degrees in a positive direction or a negative direction. So everything that we just did up here, we were measuring in a positive direction. And so down here, some example, I could have my initial side of my angle here and my terminal side of my angle. And I could call this angle measure negative 45 degrees. Or I could, let's erase this here. I could call this right here, this is my terminal side, or this is my initial side, this is my terminal side. This could be negative 90 degrees right here, which I also know is the same thing as positive 270 degrees. So we'll be working a lot with angles that are moving in the positive direction and in the negative direction, but it's important for you to know that this here is always, let's highlight this is always a measure of my initial side, and whatever's floating out here is the measure of my terminal side. So we will always start to measure angles from this positive x-axis right here. So moving forward, in working with angles, so this is asking us to find the reference angle. So when we are talking about a reference angle of on a coordinate plane here, I'm always talking about the angle that the angle that's made with the x-axis. So I want to know, although this angle that's drawn here, it starts here, it goes around 360 degrees, and then it goes around again. So we can measure that as 665 degrees. I want to know, what's the measure of this angle right here? What's the measure of the angle that's sort of attached to my x-axis? So I can see here that I am, let's get another color, that I am going around 360 degrees. And then here I'm going around a certain amount so that I can get to 665 degrees. So I can say, well, what is 665 minus 360? That will give me 305 degrees. So that means that the angle that I'm talking about here, so just from here to here, is 305 degrees. So I know to go that extra sort of chunk here, that this would get me to 360. This would be 55 degrees. So I can call this reference angle 55 degrees. So this is a 55 degree angle, and if this is my initial side and this is my terminal side, we could call that negative 55 degrees. Looking over here, I'm starting here and I'm going in the negative direction, so negative 370 degrees. So I want to know what's the angle that's made so that this is my initial side and this is my terminal side. So what's the measure of this angle in here? It is 10 degrees. Because one full rotation is 360, and it looks like I'm going 10 over. Looking here at number 3, if I'm going negative 250 degrees, I know that if this is my initial side, going straight across would put me at 180 degrees. So to go all the way up to 250 would be another 70. So again, this one looks a little bit different than the ones that we were working with before. So I want to know what is this angle that's made with the x-axis. So this is my reference angle here that I'm looking for. So whenever we talk about these reference angles, I could have an angle measure that's here in the first quadrant, and I'm looking for this reference angle. I could have an angle measure that's here in the second quadrant, and I'm looking for what's this angle measure that's sort of made nicely with the x-axis. I could have something here, and I'm looking for what is this angle measure, and something here, I'm looking for what is this angle measure. So we're always, sometimes if you were to make triangles here, think of it as a bow tie. So I'm always looking for the bow tie piece when I'm looking for the reference angle. So coming over here to number 4, to this last one, this is saying that to go from here to here, I'm going negative 5 pi over 3. So I started to do this problem for you down here. To go all the way around the circle, it would be 2 pi or 6 pi over 3. So 5 pi over 3 plus something pi over 3 gets me to 6 pi over 3. So the measure of this angle right here is pi over 3. And we'll work more with radians. I know for some of you they're still really new, but think going back to sort of making some common denominators, thinking about working in terms of pi, so on and so forth. So here, this is saying find the measure of each angle. So it's giving us a reference angle, and it wants us to find the measure of each angle. So going from here to here, I know is negative 180 degrees, and I'm adding another 50 degrees. So I can take that 180 and add 50 degrees. The measure of this angle will be negative 230 degrees going this way here. So negative 230, but what's the measure of the angle if I were to treat this as my initial side and this as my terminal side? Well, I know there are 360 degrees in an entire circle, so if 230 of them are already taken, that would make this measure here 130 degrees. Looking over here at number 11, let's see here. It looks like if this is a measure of 35 degrees, then looking at my last piece, my last sort of run around the circle, that is going to give me, we can take 360 and subtract 35 degrees from it. So this green bit right here will be 325 degrees. And it looks like I go around my circle once, so that's 360. And then I go around my circle again, that's another 360 degrees. And then my last piece, which we already measured to be that 325. So 360 plus 360, that's 2 times around the circle, plus my last piece, which is 325. That's going to give me an angle measure of 1,045 degrees. So that is a very large angle, many times around the circle there. So here, in working with angles, so we can draw the angle that's given. So at the beginning of this, we talked a little bit about how if I just had an angle with an initial side here and a terminal side here, that would give me 0 degrees. We talked about here, that would give me an angle of 90 degrees if I were to measure this angle. Moving forward, this is 180 degrees. Adding another 90 degrees to that 180 degrees is 270 degrees. So looking at negative 170, I can come in here and say that this is the same thing as negative 90 degrees. Going in this direction, this is the same thing as negative 180 degrees. This is negative 270 degrees. And then all the way around my circle here is also negative 360 degrees. So where does negative 170 fall? I would say that if this is my initial side, negative 170 degrees would probably fall somewhere right over here. So this would be an example of drawing an initial side. So here's my initial side, here's my terminal side, and I'm at negative 170 degrees. 590 degrees means that I'm going around the circle to 360, and once I go around my circle to 360, I still have another 230 degrees left to go. So knowing that this is 0, this is 90, this is 180, and this is 270, so 590 minus 360, I still have another 230 degrees to go, and 230 fits nicely right over here. So I'll go around my circle once for 360, I'll go around again, and I'll stop right here. So that's my measure of 590 degrees. So here, degrees and radians, and sort of putting it all together. So this says convert to degrees or radians, list a co-terminal angle less than 360 degrees or 2 pi, and label the angle on the circle. So this is, that's asking us to do quite a few things here. So the first thing that we'll do, we'll just do a few of these together. The first thing that we'll do is let's go ahead and convert. Let's start with 330 degrees. So 330 degrees times pi radians over 180 degrees. And when I convert 330 degrees into pi radians, I can see here that this gives me 330 degree, or no, my degrees ended up canceling out here. So 180, my degrees, I didn't mean to cross that whole piece out there. Just my little degree symbol, because we're only left with radians. So 330 pi radians over 180. And when I simplify that all the way down, I'm left with 11 pi over 6 radians. 11 pi over 6 radians. So here I have convert to degrees or radians, list a co-terminal angle. So when we talk about co-terminal angles, we're just talking about something sort of up at our beginning piece here, where this angle measure here is negative 230, and this piece here is 130, but my angle line is still in the same spot. So that's a little bit about coterminal angles, so something that's less than 360 or 2 pi, and label the angle on the circle. So here I am going to go ahead, if I know that this is 90 degrees, this is 180 degrees, this is 270 degrees, if this is the initial side of my angle, and again this is 360 degrees, that my 330 degrees is going to be somewhere over here. So this is 330 degrees, and here this angle measure would be 30 degrees, or I could also say that it's negative 30 degrees. Let's take a look at 7 pi over here. So 7 pi radians times 180 degrees over pi radians. My pi's will cancel, and I'm left with 180 times 7. So that is going to be 1,260 degrees. So if this is my initial side, I'm not going to give you an example here of drawing this angle in degrees, but instead, let's come back to this radians piece here. So I know I can start here. This is the initial side of my angle. And if I go over here, that's 1 pi, that's 2 pi, that's 3 pi, 4 pi, 5 pi, 6 pi, and 7 pi. So I've come all the way around the circle so many times, measuring half circles each time because I know that half of the circle is pi radians. So an example of a coterminal angle that's less than 360 degrees, I know that this part here is 180 degrees, or pi radians, on my sort of circle here that I'm using to measure. So I could say that this is either coterminal with pi or coterminal with 180 degrees. So I will go ahead and give you a chance to get some of those other problems done. We will work on these in class on Tuesday and Thursday of this week. If you'd like to finish going over the rest of these together, we can definitely do that. But other than that, good luck, and as always, please shoot me an email if you have any questions.